Money doesn't change people. It just shows you the rot they've been hiding. I learned that the moment I placed my signature on the last page and heard the room go unnaturally still, like the air itself understood what $20 million could do to a woman whose husband had already stopped looking her in the eyes months ago. The papers sat in front of me, thick and final, humming with consequences I hadn't earned yet, but would soon meet face to face. The attorney across the table tried to smile, but even he sensed the shift. "Congratulations," he said softly. "This kind of blessing changes a family." Blessing? He had no idea. The folder closed with a heavy thud, and my pulse jumped. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel fear. I felt something sharper, an edge pressing beneath my ribs like a warning I hadn't fully heard yet. That's when my grandfather's voice rose in my mind, raw, gravelly, and impossibly clear. "Protect what's ours, even from who you love." All my life, I thought the man was being dramatic, standing in that office with the ink still wet on a $20 million sale. The truth of his warning burned through me like a second spine. I gathered the documents slowly, hands trembling even though I kept telling myself I was fine. The lithium surveyors had nearly tripped over their own excitement when they found the mineral pockets on the old farm, layers of clay so rich they practically glowed on the imaging scans. For the first time, my grandfather's land was worth what he always said it was, and today I finally had proof. Stepping outside, the heat smothered me instantly, pressing down with that southern heaviness that always made the world feel slower, thicker, harder to run from. I inhaled deeply, grounding myself. This moment was supposed to feel like triumph, a new beginning, a future. Instead, it felt like the start of a storm gathering behind me. I reached my car, fingers brushing the faded silver horseshoe dangling from the ignition. My grandfather's last gift. He told me to keep it close, said it was a reminder that protection doesn't always look like strength. Sometimes it looks like listening. Sometimes it looks like leaving. I held the charm for one long second, letting the metal warm against my skin. This is normally where I'd tell you to celebrate with me, but I don't want celebration. If you're still following, just say something nice in the comments. I need to know who's walking with me before this road gets darker. There's something powerful about knowing someone is standing with you before the story gets dark. I placed the key in the ignition and sat back for a breath. My chest felt tight, not with fear, but with the weight of knowing something was shifting around me, something quiet and slow and dangerous. I couldn't name it yet. I only felt it thrumming under my skin like a second heartbeat. This is it, I whispered to myself. The day everything changes. And this is the moment I should properly introduce myself. I'm Talia Hardy, granddaughter, attorney, wife. At least, at the time, I thought I was still a wife. I turned the key. The engine hummed, smooth, familiar, ordinary. Nothing about the sound hinted that anything was wrong. Nothing warned me that the moment I shifted into drive, my life would split into a before and after. But then I heard it, a soft creak, barely there, like metal whispering a secret. I frowned, leaning slightly forward to listen, but the noise vanished beneath the engine's low rumble. Excitement tugged me forward, pulling me faster than caution could anchor me. I eased onto the road, still picturing the look on Howard's face when I told him the news. I didn't know something thin and calculated was waiting under the car, silent as a held breath, ready to answer my grandfather's warning for me. and ready to answer it violently. The wind pushed against my window as soon as I eased onto the highway, warm and heavy like it was warning me to slow down. But I couldn't. My heart was beating too fast. My mind was already halfway home imagining Howard's expression when he heard the news. $20 million. Enough to change everything. Enough to change us. Traffic thinned out, stretching the road into a long, sunlit ribbon. I pressed my foot to the gas a little harder, letting the car glide forward. The hum under the engine felt steady, familiar enough to quiet the tiny creak I'd heard earlier. I promised myself I'd check it later. Right now, I just wanted to get home. The air tasted different the moment I hit the bridge. Salt from the river, iron from the railings warming in the sun. I felt the horseshoe keychain bouncing against my knee, tapping lightly like it was trying to get my attention. My grandfather used to say metal remembers danger before the body does. I didn't remember that warning until much later. The first sign something was wrong came as a tremor in the steering wheel. Light, barely noticeable. I adjusted my grip, blaming the old wood planks beneath the tires. Then I pressed the brake just enough to keep the car steady, only to feel nothing. No resistance, no grip, no pull. The pedal hit the floor like it was falling into an empty well. I pressed harder, my breath catching in my throat. Still nothing. No slow, no drag, just an awful, hollow looseness. My pulse exploded. The road ahead rushed toward me faster than it should have. The guardrail glittered in my peripheral vision. Too close, too bright. I yanked the wheel left, desperate to control anything. The car fishtailed. The back end swung wide like a creature breaking free. I braced my forearm against the seat. Heat rushed up my spine. The world tilted. Gravel cracked beneath me. The car shot off the edge of the pavement, the trees rising like a wall I hadn't seen coming. I opened my mouth to scream, but the sound never made it out. Metal screamed for me instead. The collision hit like a fist from inside the earth. One brutal punch that sent the glass shattering, the airbag exploding against my chest, and my body jerking forward so hard it felt like my bones were trying to leap out of me. My head snapped to the side. Light burst behind my eyes. Then silence. A thick, heavy silence that didn't feel real. My hands reached out on instinct, searching for something familiar, something solid. My fingers brushed the cold metal of the horseshoe keychain, half buried under my palm. I curled my hand around it, squeezing until the edges dug into my skin. My grandfather's voice moved through the haze. What's ours is worth protecting, even when danger wears a quiet face. The edges of the world began to tilt. Colors smeared. My breath came shallow. Something warm slid down the side of my face. Far away, tires crunched against gravel. Doors slammed. Voices rose, overlapping, urgent. She's alive. Get the backboard. Watch her neck. She took a hard hit. Hands touched my shoulder, steady but careful. A flashlight beam passed over my eyes. Too bright. Too sharp. I tried to lift my head, but my body didn't belong to me. Pulses weak but present. Someone said, "Let's move fast." I felt them lift me, the world tilting again. My fingers wouldn't unclench from the horseshoe. Someone tried to ease it from my hand, but even unconsciousness couldn't break that grip. A voice softened beside my ear, closer, warmer than the others. It cut through everything, threading a lifeline through the blur. Ma'am, stay with me. The world folded in on itself before I could answer. The first thing I felt was the weight. Heavy, pressing, sitting on my chest like someone had stacked the whole world there while I was asleep. The room around me was quiet, too clean, too white, humming with machines that reminded me I'd survived something I shouldn't have. When I tried to move, pain cracked through my ribs like a warning not to try that again. My throat burned when I swallowed. My head throbbed as if the accident had left its heartbeat inside my skull. A soft voice drifted in from the doorway. You're awake. The nurse stepped closer, her face gentle but rehearsed, like she delivered this kind of news many times. We had to remove your wedding ring during intake, she said, lifting a small plastic bag. Inside it sat the thin gold band Howard slid on my finger years ago. Your hand was too swollen. We didn't want it cutting off circulation. She placed the bag on the bedside table. The ring slid to the corner, glinting under the fluorescent light. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Something about it lying there, separate from me, unclaimed, felt wrong. Like a piece of my life had been peeled away without asking what I wanted. Do you want it back on? She asked. The answer didn't come. Not from my throat. Not from my spirit. Not from anywhere. She nodded quietly, as if she understood a question I hadn't voiced. Your husband hasn't been in yet, but sometimes people freeze when emergencies happen. I'm sure he'll come. The words were soft, but the way she avoided my eyes told me she didn't believe them. When she left, the room settled again. Empty, air still, sunlight pressed against the blinds, casting long bars across the sheets, bright enough to show that the chair beside my bed hadn't been touched, moved, or warmed by anyone. Howard should have been in that chair. Howard should have been the first voice I heard. Howard should have been the one saying, "Baby, I'm here." Instead, it was silence. And the silence carried a shape I recognized, but didn't want to admit yet. I forced myself upright, breath trembling as pain shot through my side. My phone sat on the rolling tray next to the bed, cracked across the screen, but still working. I grabbed it with fingers that wouldn't stay steady. 2 notifications glowed back at me. Neither was from him. I dialed his number. The ring dragged on, slow and accusing. On the 4th ring, someone picked up. Yeah, just that. No worry, no relief. Just a cold exhale shaped into one syllable. It's me, I whispered. I was in an accident. A beat of silence. Then a sigh. Sharp. Annoyed. I'm busy right now, he said. My heart stuttered. Howard, I'm in the hospital. And I don't have time for your problems. The words didn't hit like a slap. They hit like truth. A truth that had been sitting behind my shoulder for months, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. I closed my eyes, the room spinning. I thought maybe he'd soften. Maybe he'd realize what he was saying. Maybe, but then I heard it. A laugh. A woman's laugh. Soft. Young. Too close to his phone. Before I could breathe, the line clicked. The call was gone. I stared at the blank screen, feeling the ringing continue inside my chest long after the phone went silent. Around me, the monitors hummed steadily. The room stayed still. The ring on the table caught the light again, flashing like something trying to warn me. The only thing louder than the silence was the truth I could no longer outrun. And somewhere down the hall, a nurse moved past my door, her footsteps fading, leaving me alone with the echo of a stranger's laughter still burning in my ear. Daylight never really settled in the room. It poured through the blinds in stripes, then faded, then returned again, like time was moving without asking whether I was ready for it. Each cycle reminded me that another hour, another day, had passed without Howard walking through that door. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting IVs, offering quiet suggestions I barely heard. I nodded when they spoke. I swallowed what I could. I slept in pieces. But the one thing I kept doing was listening for his footsteps, his voice, his presence. Nothing came. On the morning of the second day, a young nurse with braids tied back in a loose bun hovered beside my bed, holding a clipboard. She hesitated before speaking, like the truth she carried needed permission to exist. "Ma'am, someone called this morning asking about your condition," she said softly, but they didn't give a name. They hung up before I could ask if they were family. Something in my chest tightened. A man or a woman? She shook her head. They whispered. Hard to tell. The air shifted again. That same feeling I'd had at the lawyer's office, like truth was pressing against me from somewhere I couldn't see. After she left, quiet settled like dust in the corners. I watched the hallway across from me, noting the slow rhythm of hospital life, the squeak of a rolling cart, the soft murmur of nurses, the distant ringing of a call button. Then I noticed her, the elderly woman in the room across the hall. Her bed faced her doorway, and every now and then her eyes would drift toward my room like she was checking on me. On the second afternoon, her nurse wheeled her a little closer to her door for sunlight. When the nurse stepped away, the woman lifted a shaky hand and motioned for me to come closer. It took effort, but I shifted, leaning slightly over the side of my bed to hear her. Her voice was raspy, but carried a strength that felt older than the building itself. "Baby," she whispered, "some people love what you give, not who you are." My breath stilled. She didn't know my name, didn't know my story, didn't know the call I'd made, the laughter I heard, or the bruised truth I was choking on. But her words settled over me like they'd been waiting for the right wound to fall into. I swallowed hard. "You don't even know me." Her smile was tired but wise. A hurting woman knows another. Pain got a scent all its own. Her nurse returned, adjusting her drip and rolling her back toward the window. Even then, her eyes lingered on me for a moment, steady and sure, like she knew I needed to borrow a little of her strength to stand up inside myself again. The rest of the day passed in fragments. A physical therapist taught me how to breathe through the pain. A young doctor updated my chart. A janitor swept the hall quietly. Humans moved around me while my spirit tried to stitch itself back together. By the third morning, I wasn't listening for Howard anymore. Not the way I had before. Something had shifted. Something small, quiet, but real. A seed planted by a stranger who saw through me without needing my history. I reached for the tiny bag on my table. The wedding ring glinted up at me again, thin and innocent looking. I touched it with the tip of one finger. The metal felt colder than it should have. For the first time since the accident, a thought wild enough to frighten me rose in my chest. What if the man I'd been waiting for wasn't mine anymore? The hallway outside grew quieter, the kind of quiet that happens before something arrives. I eased back against the pillows, listening. The hum of machines, the shuffle of distant shoes. Then, heavy footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming straight toward my room. The footsteps stopped right outside my door, heavy enough to make the frame shiver. I shifted upright, breath tight, ribs aching with the movement. The handle turned slowly, too slowly, and the door eased open like whoever stood behind it wanted the moment to sting. Howard stepped in first. His face held none of the worry I had prayed for, not even anger, just a hard, irritated calm that told me he hadn't come to comfort me. He came because something in him wanted to see what was left of me. Behind him walked a young woman, pretty, fresh-faced, soft around the eyes. She moved with the kind of confidence that comes from thinking you're wanted, even protected. Her hand brushed the back of his arm, like she belonged there. My stomach tightened. Howard glanced around the room before looking directly at me. "Well," he said, "you look stable." The way he said stable felt like someone stepping on fresh bruises. The woman beside him chuckled quietly, her eyes moving over the foreline, the bruising on my cheek, the bandage across my forehead. She didn't look shocked or sympathetic, just curious, like she was examining a story she'd been told but never believed. "I told you she exaggerates things," Howard said to her, his tone light, almost playful. "Always been dramatic. Even a little fall turns into a production." My breath lodged in my throat. A fall. That's what he called it. His eyes slid over to me, cool and detached. "You could have called an ambulance instead of interrupting my day." The young woman laughed again, softer this time, pressing 2 fingers to her lips as if she was trying to behave. And that's when I saw it. The scarf around her neck. Honey brown, lightweight, the same floral edging I'd recognize anywhere. A gift, one I had bought years ago, for a client who came into my office with a split lip, trembling hands, and eyes begging for escape. My heart lurched. For a second, the hospital room dissolved around me, and that memory rose, me wrapping that scarf around a young woman's shoulders and telling her she deserved a life that didn't hurt. But I couldn't place the face. Not yet. Trauma ages people, changes them, rebuilds them. I blinked, trying to steady the world around me. The scarf settled against her blouse, moving gently when she laughed again, this time at something Howard whispered in her ear. I could feel the ground inside me shifting, cracking open. Howard turned his back to me momentarily, looking at the chart clipped to the end of my bed. "Doctors say you'll be fine," he said. "Good news, considering everything else going on." Everything else. The words landed wrong, like they were holding a meaning I wasn't meant to see yet. The young woman stepped closer to the foot of my bed, her eyes taking in my injuries more carefully this time. Something flickered there. Curiosity? Recognition? Unease? Her gaze slid upward, tracing the bruise across my cheek, the swelling around my eye, the stitches near my temple. She swallowed hard, hands tightening around her scarf. Howard kept talking, but she wasn't listening to him anymore. She was staring at me, really looking at me. Her breathing shifted, shallow, uneven, the kind someone makes when a memory is struggling to push through. Her lips parted, her brows pinched together, the color drained from her face, as if she'd seen something she wasn't prepared to face. The scarf slipped from one shoulder, exposing the faintest scar along her collarbone, one I had seen years ago on a trembling young client. The room stilled, her eyes widened, and in that moment, something in her expression changed completely, as though the truth had slammed into her chest without warning. At first, The young woman didn't move. She just stood there at the foot of my bed, one hand clutching that honey-brown scarf like it was holding her together. Her eyes were fixed on my face, locked, unblinking, trembling. Howard kept talking behind her, rambling about insurance forms or inconveniences or whatever story he'd rehearsed. His voice sounded far away, like it was coming through water. Her voice cut through it, a hoarse whisper, barely shaped, barely human. No, no. Howard paused. What's wrong with you? She stepped back, so quickly the four-pole rattled beside my bed. Hands shaking, breath stuttering. Her eyes never left my face, widening with every second. Her lips quivered, as if a truth she'd buried long ago was clawing its way up her throat. Then her knees gave. She caught herself on the bed rail, knuckles white. Howard snapped, "Get it together." But she wasn't listening to him. She was staring at me. Only me. And then she said it. Loud. Raw. A sound torn out of her chest, like pain being ripped loose. "Oh, my God, she's my—" Her voice cracked. Her whole body folded inward, as if she were shrinking under the weight of memory. "My lawyer." The word shattered the air. Howard's eyes jerked to her, confusion slicing through his irritation. "What are you talking about?" But she wasn't hearing him. She was sinking into something deep, something old. My heart punched at my ribs. And that's when the flashback came. Fast, sharp, like a door slamming open in my mind. A younger version of her, maybe 22, walked into my office wearing a sweatshirt 2 sizes too big and fear that didn't fit on any human face. She sat small in the chair, hands twisted together, eyes swollen from crying. "I can't leave," she whispered. "He said he'll kill me if I leave." Her voice had trembled the same way it trembled now. Back then, I had leaned in, gently moved her hands aside, and said words I don't give freely to everyone. "You're safe here. I'll fight for you." I took her case without charging a dime. I worked nights gathering evidence, making calls, filing petitions. I sat with her in court while her abuser glared across the room. She shook, and I held her hand. She cried, and I told her she wasn't alone. I fought like she was my own blood, and when her case closed, when she finally walked free, she hugged me so tightly I felt her ribs shake against mine. Then she disappeared from my life, the way survivors do when they're rebuilding themselves from dust. Seeing her now, standing beside my husband, made the ground tilt. But the look in her eyes said she was the one falling. She backed away from the bed, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other gripping the scarf like a lifeline. Howard stepped forward. "What the hell is wrong with you?" She shook her head wildly, tears already streaking down her face. "You never told me." "Told you what?" he snapped. "That you were married," she sobbed. "That she's her, she's the one who saved me." The room cracked open. Howard grabbed her arm. "Lower your voice." She yanked away. "You lied to me." Her breathing spiraled into panic. She stumbled toward the door, nearly tripping over the pulse monitor stand. "Wait." Howard reached for her again. But she bolted, out of the room, down the hall, crying so hard her steps echoed. Howard cursed under his breath and stormed after her, slamming the door behind him so hard the walls shook. And just like that, the room was silent again, except for the sound of everything I thought I knew, breaking. The hallway outside my room pulsed with noise, shuffling feet, rolling carts, distant voices, but two voices cut through everything else. Howard's and hers. Sharp, strained, cracking under pressure. I didn't move, didn't breathe too deeply. I just closed my eyes and let their argument bleed through the thin hospital walls. "You made a scene," Howard hissed. His voice was low but shaking. "You embarrassed both of us." "I didn't know." Janelle sobbed. "You lied to me. You didn't tell me she was your wife. You don't raise your voice at me." He snapped. There was a scuffle, shoes shifting, someone pulling away, someone pulling closer. "You told me she hurt you?" She cried. "You told me she drained you." You said, "Stick to the story I gave you." He cut in, cold and final. "Don't you forget what I've done for you." Her breath stuttered, the sound of someone who'd been trapped before, haunted before, controlled before. "Howard, I can't." "You can," he said. "You will." Silence followed, the kind that doesn't come from peace, only from fear. Footsteps moved away, not together, separate, uneven, and then nothing. I opened my eyes slowly, letting the truth settle into me like a stone sinking to the bottom of a river. They were both lying, to each other, to me, to themselves. But for the first time since the accident, I didn't feel powerless. I felt aware, awake, not healed but alert. The door eased open, and the same nurse from the previous morning stepped in. Her expression was gentle, but something about the way she looked at me made me wonder how much she had overheard too. She held the small plastic bag with my wedding ring, its gold circle pressing against the clear walls like a trapped insect. "Would you like this back on?" she asked. Her voice held no judgment, no assumption, just softness. I looked at that ring the way you look at something that used to be part of you, but now feels like it belongs to someone else. There was a time I would have slipped it back on without thinking, a time when the weight of that metal had felt like a promise. Now it felt like a lie. "No," I whispered. "Not right now." She nodded, a small understanding smile, touching her lips. "I'll keep it safe for you." But we both knew I wasn't asking her to protect a ring. I was asking her to give me space from a marriage I was no longer sure existed. After she left, the room settled again. Afternoon light filtered through the blinds, painting soft lines across my blanket. The hum of machines continued their steady rhythm, a quiet reminder that my heart was still beating, even if everything else felt fractured. I shifted carefully, trying not to pull at the stitches. Something sharp nudged beneath my shoulder blade. I eased forward, wincing as pain shot through my ribs. My hand slid behind the pillow. My fingertips brushed paper. Folded, thin, deliberate. I froze. Someone had placed it there. Not a nurse. Not hospital staff. Someone who didn't want to be seen slipping anything into my bed. I pulled it out slowly, my pulse thudding in my ears. The paper was warm from my body heat. Edges creased, the handwriting on the front hurried but familiar. "For you." Just that. 2 words. No name. No explanation. My breath caught as I unfolded it carefully, afraid of what truth had finally decided to reveal itself. The note opened, and everything inside me tightened. The note trembled in my hand before I even unfolded it. Something in my spirit already knew it wasn't written to comfort me. It was written to pull me out of something I hadn't yet seen clearly. The handwriting was shaky, as if written in a rush or fear. I eased it open, Just one sentence sat in the center of the page. Ink pressed so hard it bled faintly through the back. He's lying to you. Be careful. My breath hitched. The room felt smaller instantly, the walls closing in around the truth I'd been too injured and too hopeful to face. The A wasn't a name I recognized, but the warning, the urgency, the way it had been slipped beneath my pillow told me someone knew something I didn't, something dangerous, something they risked writing down. For a moment, I just stared at the note, the letters swimming as my pulse throbbed at the base of my skull. The accident, the silence, the laughter on the phone, the argument in the hallway, the scarf, her face. Everything began rearranging itself inside me, forming a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't avoid anymore. A soft knock tapped against my door, pulling me back. My lawyer, Grant, stepped inside, gray suit wrinkled, tie loosened, eyes brimming with questions he hadn't yet asked. He looked around the room quickly, as if checking to see who had been here before him. "You're awake," he said, lowering his voice. "How are you feeling?" I held up the note instead of answering. This was under my pillow. He took it carefully, scanning the words. His jaw tightened. "Someone's trying to warn you." My chest tightened. "About what?" Grant didn't sit. He paced once beside the bed, then stopped abruptly, as if deciding whether to protect me or tell me everything at once. "I checked your accounts this morning," he said. "Not because of the accident, because something flagged on my end." A slow chill crawled up my spine. "What flagged?" He opened his briefcase and pulled out a printed alert from the bank. The bank's logo sat at the top, cold and official. "This," he said, "someone tried to access your pending deposit, the $20 million from the land sale." My hand went rigid around the sheets. "Access how?" "A request to accelerate transfer. Late last night, with documents claiming you'd authorized medical power of attorney." My stomach flipped, but I didn't. "I know," he cut in gently. "The paperwork wasn't even fully processed yet. That's what stopped it." The world steadied and shook at the same time. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. The accident had just happened. I'd been unconscious. I hadn't seen my own husband, but someone was already moving like I was gone. Grant watched my face. "You didn't tell anyone about the sale yet, did you?" "No," I whispered. "Not a soul." He let out a slow exhale. "Then whoever tried to access your funds already knew the land was worth more than you realized." My ribs tightened painfully, not from the accident, but from recognition. Howard had been distant long before the crash. Distracted, irritated, whispering in rooms I wasn't allowed to enter. And the breaks, the sudden failure, the laughter behind the phone call, the note in my hand felt heavier than paper. It felt like evidence. Grant glanced toward the doorway before continuing, lowering his voice even further. "Before the accident, did you notice anything wrong with your car?" A memory flickered, the faint creak beneath the engine, the way the steering wheel trembled right before everything went black. "I heard something," I said slowly, "but I didn't think." Of course I hadn't thought, because when you love someone, you don't go searching for the ways they might be trying to destroy you. Grant nodded, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. "I need you to understand this," he said. "The bank almost approved the request. It looked legitimate, too legitimate." My fingers tightened, around the note again. Someone had planned for me not to wake up, or at least not to wake up in time. Grant leaned closer, placing the printed alert on my lap. The bank flagged a suspicious attempt to control your funds. The words hit harder than the crash. Grant didn't waste time. He returned the next morning with a stiff jaw, a leather folder tucked under his arm, and a heaviness in his eyes that warned me nothing he was about to say would bring comfort. He shut the door behind him and pulled the blinds halfway, lowering the light in the room as if the truth needed fewer witnesses. "I have more," he said quietly, "and it isn't good." My pulse throbbed beneath my bandages. "More what?" He opened the folder. Inside was a stack of documents, a few printed images, and one thick envelope sealed with red tape. He placed them on my lap one by one, like laying evidence before a judge. "Your husband filed a petition this morning," he said. "Temporary medical authority." The words vibrated through me. "He wants control of my care. And your financial decisions," Grant added. "If it's granted, he'll be authorized to move money, sign documents, transfer assets, all under the claim that you're incapacitated." A tremor rose through my ribs. I woke up. "I'm conscious." "How could they?" "Because the petition was prepared before you woke up." The room tilted. "Prepared before." Like he expected me not to open my eyes. Like someone had been planning for a life I wasn't supposed to continue living. Grant sat beside the bed, lowering his voice. "There's more. And this part is troubling." He slid a photograph toward me. The colors were sharp, the image crisp. Howard standing outside a small auto shop. The angle was from across the street, grainy at the edges, but clear enough to show his profile. I stared at it, my heartbeat climbing. "When is this from?" 3 days before your accident," Grant said. Something inside me tightened, twisting hard. Howard didn't handle our car maintenance. He never had. That had always been my responsibility, or at least that's what I believed. I forced a breath. Maybe he was getting an oil change, or... Grant shook his head. I called the shop. He placed a printed transcript in my hand. He had them do something specific, something unusual. My fingers shook as I took it. The words on the page blurred, then sharpened, brake line inspection and adjustments. The word adjustments dug into me like a needle. Grant placed the next photo down. This one showing Howard inside the shop, speaking closely with the mechanic, a look of practiced calm on his face. I stared at the images, nausea rising. My mind replayed the moment before the crash, the soft creak under the car, the tremble in the steering wheel, the brake pedal falling hollow beneath my foot. Grant wasn't finished. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small plastic evidence bag. Inside, it was a wrinkled paper slip, a receipt. "I found this in your glove box when I checked the car this morning," he said. The bag landed gently on my lap, but the truth inside it hit with full force. I lifted the receipt slowly, the date glaring up at me. The same day Howard insisted he'd take my car in for a quick tune-up. My throat tightened. The memory slid into place with brutal clarity. Howard grabbing my keys that morning, saying he'd handle it because I had too much on my plate already. My stomach twisted. I had thanked him for the favor. Grant leaned forward, voice low and steady. "We're not making any accusations yet, but I need you to see the sequence." He tapped the receipt, then the photographs, then the petition for medical authority, then the bank alert still sitting on the table beside me. Someone tried to access your 20 million. He said, your husband filed for control of your medical decisions before you woke up, and he took your car to a mechanic days before the accident. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. Every breath felt like it was scraping my insides. Grant studied my face carefully. Talia, he said, voice steady as stone, do you still think that crash was an accident? Night had settled over the hospital, wrapping the hallways in a soft hush. Most of the rooms around me were dark, their occupants asleep or drifting in and out. I was wide awake, my mind replaying every photo, every receipt, every detail Grant had placed on my lap earlier. The truth didn't arrive loudly. It arrived like a slow tightening in my chest, a quiet rearranging of everything I thought I knew. I was staring at the ceiling when the knock came, so soft I almost thought I imagined it. The door cracked open a few inches. A familiar voice whispered, "Please don't call anyone. It's just me." Janelle slipped inside. She closed the door carefully behind her, pressing her back against it, as if she feared someone might drag her out. Her face was blotched from crying, mascara smudged along her lashes. Her scarf was twisted around her hand, wrung so tightly it looked like she was trying to squeeze the fear out of it. I didn't speak. I just watched her move toward the foot of my bed, each step small and unsteady. When she finally met my eyes, her mouth trembled. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "You have every right to hate me." Her voice cracked, and the way she stood, shoulders drawn in, hands shaking, told me she wasn't here for excuses. She was here because the truth had chased her down. "He told me you were separated," she said. "He told me you were cold, selfish, that you cheated on him first." I stayed silent. The truth didn't need me to defend it. Tears welled in her eyes. I believed him because he said he loved me, because I just wanted someone to care. After everything I went through with my ex, her voice broke completely. She pressed her palms to her face, shoulders shaking. I waited, letting her gather herself without rushing her. When she lowered her hands, a raw truth stared back at me. "I didn't recognize you at first," she whispered. "I thought I was imagining things. But when I saw your face, when I looked at your injuries," her breath hitched. "I remembered the day you held my hand in court. You fought for me like nobody ever had. I wouldn't be alive right now if it weren't for you." My chest tightened. The young woman she'd been, the one who sat trembling in my office, was still there beneath the layers of makeup and fear and forced confidence. She stepped closer. "He used me," she said. "He used both of us. I didn't know who he really was. When he told me, you were just some bitter ex-wife who wanted to ruin his life. I let myself believe it. I didn't look deeper. I didn't question why certain things didn't add up." She swallowed hard, then continued. "There were messages, texts he sent to someone saved in his phone under the initial M. He'd step outside to answer them, whisper, delete things. My breath caught. M. She nodded. I thought it meant mother. He said she needed him, said she was sick. He used that to explain every time he disappeared on me. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "But after seeing you, really seeing you, I realized M didn't mean mother. It meant money." The room chilled, not from temperature, from clarity. She closed the distance between us and reached into her purse. Her hands trembled, as she pulled out a small silver flash drive, its casing scratched. Her voice lowered to a whisper. I took this from his briefcase. I didn't know what was on it at first, but after what happened in here, I looked. She placed it gently in my palm. I think this is everything, she said. The plan, the messages, the documents, all of it. Her eyes filled again. Fear, regret, a lifetime of apologies tangled together. I can't stay. He'll notice I'm gone. But you needed to have this. She backed toward the door, breath trembling, scarf slipping from her fingers. Please be careful, she whispered. And then she ran, quiet, desperate, as if the truth she carried was chasing her down the hall. Grant returned before sunrise, his face tight, his movements clipped. He didn't bother with greetings. He didn't even sit down. He closed the blinds, shut the door, and pulled a portable laptop from his briefcase with a speed that told me this morning wasn't like any other. Show me, I whispered, my voice still raw from Janelle's confession hours earlier. He inserted the flash drive. The screen lit up, loading its contents, folders, documents, screenshots, voice memos, banking drafts. My pulse climbed with every new window that appeared. Grant clicked the first file, a PDF. The title alone pulled the air from my lungs. Medical Directive, Incapacity Transfer Authorization. Signed, stamped, dated, forged. My forged signature stared back at me, looped, practiced, believable. I swallowed hard. How long has he been preparing this? Grant clicked another file. This one was worse. A drafted email from Howard to an attorney I'd never heard of. Once the directive is in place, we can proceed with asset consolidation. My blood turned hot. He clicked a series of screenshots, messages between Howard and it has to look natural. No suspicion. Once she's declared unfit, you'll have full access. Howard, she won't survive the stress long anyway. My stomach clenched. The letters blurred. I forced myself to breathe. Grant opened a folder labeled Conversations. Audio clips. Short but clear. Howard's voice filled the room. I don't care if she's recovering. She's been weak for months. One hard push and she'll fold. Another file. I already spoke to the doctor. If she's confused or emotional when he checks on her, it helps my case. I pressed a hand to my chest. My breath felt trapped under my ribs. Hearing him say it, hearing the cold calculation in his voice, was worse than imagining it. Grant paused the audio. He didn't look at me immediately. He closed the folder carefully, as though handling evidence of something sacred and violent at the same time. Janelle wasn't lying. He said, your husband wasn't just preparing for you to be incapacitated. He was counting on it. A trembling memory rose, one I hadn't touched in years. A domestic violence case. A woman named Alicia. Her husband had slowly taken over her life, first emotionally, then medically. He'd convinced doctors she was unstable, confused, unfit to manage her affairs. When she had a panic attack from the stress, he used it to get conservatorship. Within 6 months, he drained her accounts dry. I remembered sitting across from Alicia, her hands wrapped around a cup of cold tea. He didn't have to hit me, she whispered. He just had to convince the world I couldn't think straight. Back then, I promised myself I'd never let a man manipulate me that way. Back then, I believed I'd never fall for a danger wrapped in charm. Grant's voice pulled me back. There's more. He clicked on a final document, one that wasn't forged, one that carried Howard's real signature, a draft petition, request for full conservatorship. My eyes traced the text. Words like unresponsive, disoriented, mentally compromised after trauma. All lies, all pre-written, all ready to be filed. I couldn't feel the bed beneath me anymore, just a hollow space where trust used to be. Grant turned the laptop toward me fully. Talia, he said quietly, he wasn't planning for you to recover. A cold wave slid down my spine, tighter than fear, deeper than betrayal. He folded his hands, his voice steady but heavy. The timing, the mechanic, the forged directive, the petition, everything points to a coordinated plan. My breath trembled as I lifted my eyes to his. Grant held my gaze. His next words landed like a blade. He planned to declare you unfit within a week. The day after Grant showed me the flash drive's contents, something hardened inside me. Not anger. Anger burns too fast. This was something slower, steadier, a resolve settling deep in my bones. A quiet vow that whatever Howard thought he'd finish, I would survive long enough to dismantle. I woke that morning before the nurses made their rounds. My body ached, ribs tight, hips stiff, head sore, but the pain felt different now. It wasn't a prison. It was a reminder, a map of every place I had been broken and rebuilt. The physical therapist arrived mid-morning, a tall woman with wide hands, steady eyes, and a voice that felt carved out of patience. She helped me sit up, slide to the edge of the bed, and place my feet on the cold floor. "Take your time," she said. "Your body remembers more than you think." I exhaled slowly. The first step felt impossible. My knee buckled. My hands trembled. She caught my elbow before I fell back. "You're not weak," she said calmly. "You're healing. Strength is a habit, not a moment." The words sank in deep like truth I'd forgotten. A habit, not a moment. I nodded, even as my muscles screamed in protest. We tried again. This time I stayed upright. My breath shook, but I didn't break. She guided me through movements meant to stretch, re-engage, wake up the parts of me the crash had silenced. By the time she eased me back into the bed, sweat clung to my forehead, and a dull burn throbbed behind my ribs. "You'll get there," she said, "piece by piece. Not for him, for you." After she left, I stared at the ceiling again, but not the way I had in the days after the accident. This time I was thinking, building, planning. Grant returned later with the same folder, adding 2 new documents. "We need to move quickly," he said, pulling a chair to the side of the bed. "The sale funds won't be available for full transfer until everything clears. But we can structure them now, put legal walls around the money, so no one else can touch it." I asked softly. He nodded. "This is your fight, but you don't have to do it alone." He opened the folder, showing me a preliminary trust layout, one that locked every dollar behind strict conditions, with me as the primary controller and him as temporary executor should anything happen to me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't flashy. It was airtight. Howard can file every petition he wants. Grant said, with this in place, he can't move 1 cent without a court order. And he won't get one. My hand tightened around the blanket. "Let's do it." Grant smiled faintly, a proud, quiet smile. That's what I needed to hear. The next hours blurred, me signing documents, Grant notarizing what he could On site, 2 witnesses from the hospital staff verifying signatures. Every stroke of the pen felt like another step toward reclaiming myself. When everything was signed, Grant closed his briefcase with a soft click. "You're protected financially," he said. "Now we focus on legally." I exhaled, muscles relaxing just a little. "What's next?" He didn't answer immediately. His phone buzzed. Once, twice, then a third time. The vibration was sharp in the quiet room. He frowned, opened the screen, and his whole expression shifted. His eyes moved slowly from the phone to me. Something heavy had landed, something urgent enough to cut the air between us. "Talia," he said carefully, "we have a problem." The air tightened. He turned the phone so I could see the notification. A court alert. Emergency petition filed. Filed by Howard. Timestamped 30 minutes earlier. Grant's voice dropped. He filed for emergency decision-making control. The world didn't spin this time. It sharpened. The hospital released me at dawn 2 days later, just long enough for Grant to execute the trust paperwork and arrange what he called a meeting that needed to happen before Howard filed another lie. I wasn't fully steady on my feet yet, but the strength in me had shifted. It wasn't physical. It was something harder, sharper, forged in betrayal and truth. We met at Grant's office late that afternoon. A quiet, wood-paneled room tucked behind his practice. The blinds were drawn. 2 chairs faced the desk. A third sat slightly back, placed there for a reason that hadn't yet revealed itself to me. Grant stood beside me as I eased into my seat. "Are you ready?" he asked. I nodded. He wanted control. Today, he'll see exactly what I took back. Minutes later, the front door slammed. Hard, aggressive, exactly the way Howard entered every room he thought he owned. His footsteps thundered down the short hallway, and before the receptionist could announce anything, he shoved the office door open. He strode in with Janelle behind him, her head down, her shoulders tight. Howard's eyes locked on me. Shock flickering first, then irritation, then the cold, calculated anger of a man whose plan was unraveling faster than he could control it. "Well, look who's suddenly healthy," he said. "Didn't take you long to milk that accident dry." It didn't sting. Not anymore. I sat straighter, unmoved. "Hello, Howard." He scoffed, crossing his arms. "Let's skip the drama." I filed for emergency control. This, he waved a dismissive hand at my presence, changes nothing. Grant stepped forward. "Actually, it changes everything." Howard's jaw tightened. "I wasn't talking to you." "You will," Grant replied calmly, "if you want to walk out of here without a sheriff's deputy escorting you." Howard opened his mouth, ready to snap back. But Janelle spoke first. "Howard, please don't." Her voice cracked. For the first time since she'd entered, I saw her face clearly. The makeup couldn't hide how swollen her eyes were. And when she moved closer to me, the sleeve of her blouse slipped back just enough for a faint purple mark to peek through. A bruise. Fresh. Unmistakable. My breath hitched. She flinched, pulling her sleeve down again. Too fast, too practiced. Grant saw it too. His eyes sharpened. Howard barked. "What are you doing?" "Get back over here." Janelle didn't move. Instead, she took the seat beside the desk, the one Grant had placed there intentionally, the one that wasn't beside Howard. He glared. I said, "Get over here." She flinched again at his tone, and something in me clenched. I'd seen that reaction before. In courtrooms, shelters, on faces that had learned to fear the space between a man's words and his hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I need to tell her the truth. Howard spun toward her. Don't start. But she kept going. You told me she ruined your life. You told me she was unstable. You told me she cheated. I believed everything you said. Her hands trembled in her lap. But you never told me she saved mine. Howard's face reddened. Janelle. She shook her head, cutting him off for the first time. You lied to me. You lied about her. You lied about the accident. And you lied about the money. Silence cracked across the room. Grant opened a folder slowly, letting the papers inside shift just enough for Howard to see the titles, photos of the mechanic, the receipt, the forged petitions. Howard's jaw locked. What is this? He demanded. Proof, Grant said evenly. Proof of intent, coordination, and motive. Howard stepped back, breath hitching for the first time. You can't prove anything. You're right, Grant said. Not until we ask the right questions. He placed one photograph on the desk. Howard standing outside the mechanic shop. Then another. Howard inside, speaking with the technician. Then another. The forged directive recovered from the flash drive. The room tightened around us. Grant lowered his voice, the words landing with a finality that froze Howard in place. Let's talk about the mechanic. Howard didn't sit. He hovered, jaw tight, breath sharp, eyes darting between the papers on Grant's desk and the door behind him, like he was calculating whether to fight or flee. But the moment the forensic specialist stepped into the room, all that frantic energy shifted. It went still, tight. Dr. Langston was a quiet man, older, with a calmness carved into his face like he'd spent decades examining the worst humans could do to one another. He nodded to me first, then to Grant, then finally to Howard, who stiffened at the acknowledgement. Grant gestured toward the chair. Doctor, please explain your findings. Dr. Langston opened a slim black folder and placed 2 printed reports on the desk. His voice was steady, the kind that carried no rush, no bias, only truth. I examined the vehicle this morning, he said, specifically the brake lines and the hydraulic system. Howard's nostrils flared. Anyone could have messed with the car after the accident. Dr. Langston lifted a hand gently, like he was calming a student, not confronting a man unraveling. No, the failure was pre-impact and intentional. Silence snapped across the room. He continued, 2 cuts, both shallow, both positioned to weaken the lines slowly, not all at once. Enough to give the illusion of normal braking until pressure built. Then complete failure. My breath thinned. That's exactly how it had felt. Like the car trusted me right up until it threw me into disaster. Dr. Langston placed a photograph on the desk. The lines were circled in red. Clean cuts. Controlled. Deliberate. The tool used had a narrow, serrated edge. Not something that happens by accident. Not something from age. Someone tampered with your brakes intentionally. Mrs. Hardy. Howard's face flushed deep red. You don't know when that happened. I do, Dr. Langston replied calmly. He placed another photo, this one time-stamped. The cuts began oxidizing the day after the service date on this receipt. He tapped the plastic evidence bag containing the mechanic's slip found in my glove box, meaning the car was tampered with within hours of whoever brought it in. Grant folded his hands, watching Howard with the stillness of a man waiting for the truth to finish tightening its grip. "Howard," Grant said quietly, "you were the only one with access to her car that day." Janelle shifted beside me, sleeve sliding back again, revealing a bruise I didn't need explained. Her breath shook. "I saw him," she whispered. "He said he was handling something important. I didn't know." Howard whipped toward her. "Shut your mouth." She flinched exactly the way she had in my memory of her at 22. Grant's voice dropped low. "Are you threatening a witness in my office?" Howard's chest rose sharply. "This is ridiculous. You're all trying to frame me." Dr. Langston closed his folder with a soft click. "I don't care about the motives. I only testify to the mechanics." He turned toward me, and I can state with absolute certainty, the brake failure was no accident. Howard's mask cracked. His breath came fast. His fingers twitched. He looked from me to the door again, trapped in a shrinking room built of evidence he couldn't outrun. Grant opened one final document, the trust restructuring papers. My name at the top. His name nowhere on them. "This," Grant said, sliding the folder toward me, "removes Howard from every financial privilege he assumed he had. No access, no authority, no inheritance, nothing." Howard lunged forward. "You can't sign that." I lifted the pen. My hand didn't tremble. Not this time. He stepped toward me, panic splitting through his voice. "Talia, don't, Talia, wait, just wait." But the moment had been waiting for me. The truth had been waiting for me. My strength had been waiting for me. I lowered the pen to the line and signed. Howard froze. His breath stuttered. Something inside him broke, a panic so raw it cut through the room like a blade. Before he could speak, Grant closed the folder firmly. "It's done." The courthouse doors shut behind me with a final, echoing click. It wasn't the sound of victory. It wasn't triumph. It was release, the kind that settles in your bones and makes them feel like they finally belong to you again. Howard didn't follow me out. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't speak at all once the judge denied his petition, dissolved every claim he tried to make, and confirmed the trust that now placed a wall he could never climb. Watching him shrink in that courtroom was not joy. It was closure peeling back the last layer of hurt. I stepped into the late afternoon sun, warm and forgiving. My body still carried the ache of healing, but my spirit finally stood without leaning on anything. Grant walked beside me down the courthouse steps. "You did it," he said, voice quiet, respectful. I shook my head. "No, we did it." He smiled, not with pride, but with relief. "Take some time for yourself. You've earned that." I promised him I would, and I meant it. The land my grandfather left behind looked different now, not because the new owners had begun surveying the mineral pockets, but because I stood on it a different woman, stronger, calmer, unbroken. A memorial bench had been placed at the highest point overlooking the trees, a dedication written exactly how he would have wanted it, for a man who taught us that legacy is the piece of us that lives long after breath. I traced the engraved words with the tip of my finger, remembering the way he laughed, the way he walked the fields at dawn, the way he always paused before leaving the land like he was listening to it breathe. As I sat down, I felt something shift in my pocket. The silver horseshoe keychain, his last gift to me, the same one the paramedics had found clenched in my fist. It had survived everything, just like I had. Before placing it on the bench, I let myself breathe, to truly breathe, for the first time since the accident. The wind moved through the trees gently, like the land itself was exhaling with me. A week later, a letter arrived. The handwriting was unfamiliar, small, neat, careful. I held it for a long moment before opening it. Inside was one page, and a different kind of truth. Mrs. Hardy, I joined a recovery program today, not because someone forced me, but because you showed me I deserve a life that doesn't hurt. Thank you for saving me twice, once when I was a girl in your office, and again when you looked at me like I was still worth saving. I hope one day I'm as strong as you. Janelle. My throat tightened, not from pain, from gratitude, from knowing she'd finally stepped onto a path she should have been allowed to stand on years ago. I folded the letter gently, pressing it to my chest for a moment before placing it in a drawer I knew I'd reopen someday, not to relive the hurt, but to remember the healing. I returned to the land one last time. The sun was lowering, turning the sky gold, washing everything in the kind of light you only see at the end of a long journey. I walked the hills slowly, feeling the soil shift beneath my shoes, hearing my grandfather's words echo quietly inside me. Protect what's ours, even from who you love. At the bench, I pulled the silver keychain from my pocket. It rested warm in my palm, shaped by the hundreds of times I'd held it without knowing just how much I'd needed it. I placed it on the bench beside his name, not as an offering, not as a goodbye, but as a promise kept. The wind rose gently, brushing my face like a hand smoothing away the last ache. And when I finally turned to walk away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had survived the betrayal. I had reclaimed my life. I had walked out with my future intact. I was the woman who walked away with everything because none of it had ever depended on him.